You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions, as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. In today's podcast, we are going to be talking about lab testing 101 and diving in, so that way you guys kind of have an overview. But first, we want to make sure that you guys go to beyondwellnessradio.com/newsletter. This way you'll be the first to get the updates. We usually have our shows sent out to our subscribers before you'll even hear it on iTunes, about 3 episodes early. So definitely go to beyondwellnessradio.com/newsletter. We also have a lot of things in the bag coming at you. So a lot of freebies, a lot of good things. So make sure you get on the newsletter. Second thing, make sure when you go to Beyond Wellness Radio, you click and take a look at both Justin Health and Really Healthy Now. Those are both mine and Dr. Justin's site. Dr. Justin is a functional medicine practitioner. So if any of you guys are having some real health complications, like I mentioned before, he is my go-to guy. So I would definitely hop on there, get yourself a complimentary call, and start to see if maybe you need to get pretty deeper. We're about to talk about lab testing today, so he would be the perfect person to go to. Also, if you needed help with getting your nutrition right, your mindset right, and trying to improve your health overall, you can also send me a message at reallyhealthynow.com. You can go on there and go ahead and work with me as well. So definitely go there. And one last thing, make sure that you guys go to iTunes and leave us a review. This really helps us spread the message. And yeah, for some extra incentive, maybe we'll start reading these iTunes reviews and giving something away. So definitely go to iTunes and search Beyond Wellness Radio and give us 5 stars preferably, right? And yeah. So with that being said, how's it going today, Dr. Justin?
Oh, it's great. Oh, by the way, if everyone wants to review us, beyondwellnessradio.com, and there's a little button that says write a review, and that will bring you right to the iTunes page to make it easier.
Oh, very convenient. Yes.
Absolutely. I'm doing great. I'm actually, we just talked behind the scenes here that I'm getting a whole house water filtration set up, and I'm also getting a under the counter unit set up that's reverse osmosis based as well, kind of being extra protective, as more than likely next year I'll be having a baby, keeping my fingers crossed, and we get the reverse osmosis, and I also have a system where it reinfuses some magnesium and calcium minerals back into the system as well, so we're not totally stripping out the water.
Yeah, I just go to the beach and just drink a bunch. I'm just kidding. Yeah, but no, definitely. It's important to get those minerals in the water, because I know sometimes we filter everything out, but when we filter everything out, it filters everything out, and then you get this water that has no minerals, no electric charge, so then it kind of just flows right through you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So the question that we always want to know is, what did you eat today? What was your breakfast?
So today was a different day. I got up and I worked out in my home gym. Did some kettlebell swings, did a Tabata on the row machine, did some functional lifting on my TRX, and some functional movement exercises. And then I had a nice little 35 or 40 grams of whey protein with some collagen and some bulletproof coffee. Right now I'm just sipping on a ginger kombucha before lunch.
Yeah, sounds good. I had an interview this morning, so when I woke up I had about, I want to say it wasn't that much, 15 or 20 grams of just some whey protein with some almond / coconut milk, and I threw an egg in there just for some extra protein.
Nice.
And did I put MCT on? Maybe. Oh, I think I put some. Usually when I make these smoothies, I'll put a teaspoon of maca powder or something like that in it, just for some extra kick.
Nice.
And after that, after I was done with that show, I went ahead and cooked the actual breakfast. So I had some chicken sausage and 2 more eggs. Just
awesome.
Cooked this time. Yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
So let's get on with the show. Today, we want to make sure that we gave you guys the 101 to functional lab testing.
Yes.
If you go to your doctors, you're going to get some basic panels like your basic blood work done, and that can be very useful. But there's also some other key labs that you might need to get a deeper understanding of how your body's functioning. So with that being said, let's get it started, Dr. Justin. What are some of the, or actually, before we even talk about some of the functional labs, let's just talk about some of the basic labs that you might get at, just your normal doctor.
Great. So we get our basic blood chemistry, our CBC, a complete blood count, or we get like a CMP, a comprehensive metabolic profile, or we get a lipid panel. These are all basic tests, but they really give us some great information. So a couple of key things we see off the bat when we run like a CBC with differentials. This is looking at the size of our red blood cells, and this can give us some great information. One, we can figure out if we have an anemia potentially. And there's a couple different kinds of anemia. So there's like a microcytic anemia, right? Hence the micro part. That means our blood cells are really small. And then we have like a macrocytic anemia where our blood cells are really big. So one's more of an iron-based anemia when our cells are small, and one's a B12 or folate or B6, typically a B12/B vitamin anemia when the cells are really big. And both are really important because if our cells are too small, we can't carry oxygen properly. And if we don't have oxygen, well, think back to middle school science class when you have the experiment with the candle and you put the glass jar over the candle and the candle typically goes out. So we need oxygen for metabolism, electron transport chain, glycolysis, all that good stuff. And if our red blood cells are too big, well, typically our red blood cells actually get smaller as they get more mature. So our red blood cells start out big and they actually get smaller when they're exposed to certain B vitamins. And when they don't have enough of those B12, folate, and or B6, they get stuck in this bigger size. So imagine this big, goofy red blood cell walking around. It's like really clumsy. It's like tripping over things. It's like a bull in the china shop. That's what happens when we have a B vitamin deficiency. These red blood cells aren't really mature, they aren't really coordinated, and they don't carry oxygen and nutrition properly throughout the body. So we can get fatigue, we can get coldness, numbness, and these things can also lead to thyroid problems too, which is really one of my big specialties, thyroid and adrenal issues too.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that we can see? Because I know usually when you go into your doctors, when you get this blood chemistry done, usually one of the things that we look at is our cholesterol number.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the first things that doctors might pay attention to. Sometimes it might not be perfect. What are some of the things that we might see on their tests, and what are some other tests that we can do to take a deeper look into our cholesterol numbers?
Well, cholesterol numbers, we can actually get some good information even from conventional tests. My biggest thing is looking at any number or looking at any cholesterol number or fat number in isolation typically doesn't do us much good. We want to look at in relation to other numbers. So for instance, I like HDL. HDL is a really good number, but HDL in conjunction with triglycerides is even better. So looking at your triglyceride to HDL ratio, making sure it's a minimum of 2-to-1 or less. I like closer to 1-to-1. So 1-to-1 would be like someone having 50 on the HDL and 50 on the triglycerides. We have a 1-to-1 ratio, where 2-to-1 would be like 100 on the triglycerides, 50 on the HDL. And then when you go over that ratio, it's like getting into over 100 on the trigs, which are triglycerides. So again, trying to get to that 1-to-1 ratio or 1.5-to-1, typically a really, really good place. That tells us that we're recycling cholesterol well, and it also tells us that we're not consuming too much carbohydrates and we're not getting into a place of insulin resistance.
Yeah, definitely. I know oftentimes, and this is probably something important when working with a functional medicine practitioner, when we look at the scale, like the range, usually the ranges are pretty large, and as the diversity and as the population continues to get sicker, sometimes the ranges actually shift. What do you feel about when you have someone who comes to you and like, oh, well, it says that I'm normal, but I don't really feel right?
Yeah. So we have to look at what a lab test is designed to do. So Typically, conventional medicine uses lab tests to pick up pathology or disease. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. The only problem is there's an assumption, and the assumption is if you are not diseased, you're healthy.
Yeah.
That is the assumption. Or said another way, the absence of disease equals health. And that could not be farther from the truth.
That's like saying your car that's basically, oh, you have 4 wheels on your car? Oh, well then it runs. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like saying, oh, well, if your car like isn't like, in a car accident and like dented up, then it must be perfect, right? And that's not the case. So we have to look at what is a lab test. So typically anyone that's, has done like a statistics type of class at a graduate level, they'll probably hear something known as standard deviations or a bell curve. Mm-hmm. And a bell curve in lab testing, we have the normal reference range is made out of 2 standard deviations either way. What that means is 95% of the population fits within 2 standard deviations. And outside of that, 2.5 on the high, 2.5 on the low would equal out of range. So essentially, when we're looking at lab ranges, 95% of the population are considered normal, and 2.5 on the high and low aren't. So 5% aren't normal, 95% are. So we know, like, just go walk around an airport or a public event and just walk around and just look at people. There is no way in heck that 95% of the population are healthy. There's no way. So when we look at these lab tests,
no offense to everybody, but 95%,
yeah. I mean, just go walk around. Just go to an airport and just look, right? I would say like it's probably 50-50, if less than that. Probably maybe even 25% of people are really, really healthy. Like 20% are probably really healthy. And then 80% probably have some type of symptom they're working on, and as they progress, it gets worse and worse. But when we look at the conventional lab tests, obviously we want to look at the standard lab ranges, because if something's off there, that's more of a problem. It just means the chronicity has been there. It's been there longer. But also we want to look at things on a spectrum. So we kind of have like our optimal reference range, which would be like the middle 30%. That's kind of like our optimal reference range. And then we look at things as they would veer away 10% either direction. And the farther they go away from that would be potentially the more there's an issue. And it just helps us because we can pick things up before they go out of range. It may take years to go out of range, right? So if you're running towards a cliff at full speed, well, it's just a matter of time before you fall off the cliff. Conventional medicine says we really can't do much until we literally see you in midair off the cliff, but it's already too late. You're going to hit rock bottom. So if like we see you heading in that direction, meaning we run a lab test and we see you moving, towards that second standard deviation, we can start making diet and lifestyle and stress interventions. We can look at things from a functional perspective. We can do more functional tests such as maybe obscure thyroid markers. We can look at adrenals. We can look at infections. We can look at stool testing for SIBO and parasites. We can do things that are a little bit more comprehensive.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I know that is common when it comes to testing is, at least when it comes to the functional perspective, is a adrenal complex, and making sure that you get not just a one-time reading, but basically a 4-time markers, kind of seeing the curve of a cortisol reading. Why is it important to get an adrenal panel?
Great question. I'm actually going to sidestep that question and then come back to it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Because we talked about anemia right in the beginning. I know there's a lot of biohackers that really want some solid info. So real quick with the anemia, when we start to see our red blood cells, hematocrit, and hemoglobin start dropping, that's a sign that we have an anemia. Now, when we want to figure out what kind of anemia it is, well, we would look at iron and transfer factor, and we look at TIBC and transfer in saturation and such. And this would give us some information regarding if it's an iron-based anemia. And if we start looking at the B vitamins, we look at MCH, which is mean corpuscular hemoglobin, MCHC, or mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, or MCV, which is mean corpuscular volume. These are looking at the size of the red blood cells. So when these go higher, that's more of a sign of a B vitamin or B12 anemia. So we would look at those markers to differentiate, and we may not look at them and say, well, they have to be way out of range, but we may look and say, are they in that bottom 10% on the iron, or are they in the top 10% on the B vitamin? And that way we can pick these things up before they're a problem. And again, there are specialty tests that we would look at, like urinary methylmalonic acid, or we'd run ferritin or things like that to rule out iron or rule out B12 anemia. Any questions on the anemia side, Barris? That's a big one, I find.
Yeah, and I know sometimes people have it's hard because it's kind of trying to differentiate that B12 anemia and that iron anemia, and it is also a little bit more common when it comes to the females, especially the female athletes
Yes.
that we work with. So making sure that you're paying attention. What are some let's get into some of the symptoms that we might find if someone's in it, because that's kind of a hard one if we haven't tested that yet, to make sure that maybe we should take that test. So what are some symptoms that if we were having, we should probably take a deeper look into that and get those tested?
Well, one, if we're vegetarian or vegan, we definitely need the test.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely essential, especially B12, can affect your nervous system, can affect, peripheral neuropathies, tingling, degeneration of the nerves can happen with B12 deficiency. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, it's absolutely essential. Probably one of the most important tests you could do. That's step one. Two, if you're having thyroid issues, if you're losing your hair, if you feel tired, if you just are looking a little bit more pale, if you're trying things and you're not feeling better, and you're fatigued, it has to be ruled out. Anemia has to be ruled out. One, if you're bleeding excessively around menstruation cycle, frankly, I'll be a little bit more kind of a TMI here, but if you're a female and going through more than 3 or 4 tampons per day and bleeding more than 3 to 4 days a month in your cycle, that may cause an anemia because you're losing that iron.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great indicator right there.
Yeah. So if you have so really essential if you're a woman, if you're having a heavy flow, and you're having some fatigue issues as well, that can definitely be a sign.
Yes, and then now I think let's just kind of back up a little bit because you talked about the adrenals. So let's touch upon that.
Yeah.
So adrenal testing is really helpful because your sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight mechanism, that this kind of gets activated when we are stressed. This is controlled by our adrenals. Our adrenals produce cortisol and also adrenaline. So it's really great to see how we are functioning because typically cortisol gets pulsed out in a circadian rhythm. So it's based upon light and dark. So in the morning time, we're getting more sunlight, so we have higher amounts of cortisol. And as cortisol drops throughout the day along with the sun, and darkness sets in, melatonin comes up, which pushes cortisol down even more. Cortisol drops. So it's great to look at that cortisol rhythm. One, it tells us how strong our adrenals are, and it also tells us about HPA axis dysfunction, which is basically stress affecting the communication of our brain, pituitary and hypothalamus, talking to our glands, our adrenals. And if we typically have that HPA axis dysfunction, we can see cortisol kind of basically going up or down and not quite being in the rhythm that it should be. And when we see that, it also means there could be some HPT axis dysfunction, meaning hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, because they're both really connected.
Yeah, definitely. I went ahead and went to your site and wanted to look at the LabCorp, the comprehensive total screen. It's almost seeming unbelievable, the price right now. You talk real quick about the comprehensive bioscreen blood test that you have right now currently on your site?
Yeah. So in details about that, that's a great test because it's typically I work with patients that have insurance. Mm-hmm. And when I bill insurance for a test like that, insurance will charge up to $3,000 or $4,000 sometimes.
Wow.
And the patient may still have to pay like $1,300 or $1,500 even with coverage. Mm-hmm. So I'm able to get that test for my patients for $299 cash, which is an awesome price because, I mean, and this is the reason why healthcare is so expensive, is no one should be spending $2,000 or $3,000 for a test like that, especially when the cash discounts are so much more affordable. And frankly, we can order almost every thyroid marker known to man, even a lot of our autoimmune markers. We can order all of the markers for CBC, all of the anemia markers. We can order urinary analysis as well. We can order all of the fat markers and the inflammation markers like C-reactive protein and fibrinogen and sed rate, and also vitamin D. So we get just a big window into what's happening inside someone's body. And I recommend, even if you're healthy, a test like that once a year. I do a test like that every 6 months. It's coming up time for me to do another one, but I do that about twice a year.
Yeah. And that's a really good price. Like that's an unbelievable price. Most other labs that you're looking for to get anything close to that is going to be, like you mentioned, at least like you have it priced there, at least $1,200. So you'll be lucky to find it under $1,000.
Yeah, it's actually even more affordable than Wellness FX. It's about $100 to $150 cheaper than Wellness FX. So if anyone wants to check that out, justinhealth.com/shop, and then click on lab test on the category side on the right, and you'll find it.
Yeah, definitely. So what's really fun and what we always want to test and find out is the sex hormones. So what are some of the basic, when you usually get a panel, what are some of the things that we're going to find on the readings of a basic sex hormones panel?
Well, when we're looking at sex hormones, there's a couple things we can look at. We can look at DHEA or DHEA sulfate. This is like an adrenal hormone, but it's a precursor for women to estrogen and progesterone, and for men, it's more of a precursor to testosterone. It gives us a great indicator of how our adrenal reserves are, because our adrenals are a backup generator for our sex hormones.
Yep.
So many women that when they transition into menopause or when they have PMS, really their adrenals aren't helping out. They aren't coming to the table with some extra sex hormone reserves. So they're just sitting there totally dependent upon their ovaries. So in menstruation time, or in, when the woman's actually cycling, what typically happens is just PMS and maybe excessive bleeding, maybe bloating or cramping or mood issues or headaches, things like that happen. But when the woman transitions into menopause, that's where it gets really bad, because then those ovaries, they aren't working like they used to, and up to half of all the hormones are now being totally relied upon from the adrenals. And then what happens then is we have depression, we have our skin and hair just going to hell, just looking really, really bad, mood issues, libido issues. And frankly, my number one clientele typically are women, because when this transition happens, it's really bad. And conventional medicine typically only offers, if they're no longer menstruating, they'll typically offer an antidepressant, or they'll offer some HRT, and maybe they'll offer it in creams, or maybe they'll offer the horse hormones, Prema and Provera. And you got some good doctors out there that are doing it more bioidentical now, which is great. But even that, sometimes they're still being overdosed. Sometimes they're not using the right estrogens. I find estriol tends to work better than estradiol. And also using estrogen in conjunction with progesterone.
Yeah.
And sometimes these creams aren't the best because they super saturate. When I use creams with a woman, it's typically vaginally, because the creams don't sit around, because the mucosa is so thin vaginally, it goes right into the vaginal tract, right into the bloodstream. I don't typically do any creams topically on the skin, and most of the hormones that I would use would be one, adrenal based and or female hormone, but they'd be liquid, sublingual, so we can put it right into our bloodstream, kind of like an injection, but without a needle. We can do it right through our submucosal, sublingual tissue.
Definitely. And it's not just the older women too, where they're given these treatments that are messing with their sex hormones. I mean, I've seen women get birth control just because they have a painful period and they don't want to experience the pain. But rather than figuring out why it's painful, it's like, oh, we'll just take this birth control.
Yeah.
Or even having depression and having birth control.
Exactly. And the way I look at a lot of women that have bad cycles and get put on birth control pill, it's like going to see a symphony and the conductor's off a little bit. The conductor isn't quite, getting the flutes timed up with the horns or the strings, right? So then we're not quite in sync. So it's easy for a symphony that plays beautiful music to sound like noise. And that's what happens when you're a female and your cycle's off, right? The timing of FSH and LH and our luteal phase and our follicular phase and our estrogen spike followed by our progesterone rise, all those things are off. So conventional medicine's perspective is, all right, like we're at the symphony, let's just pull out our sniper rifle and just shoot the conductor so then the orchestra stops. I know that analogy is a little bit violent there, but we're just like, we're mugging the conductor. We're like knocking the conductor off the stand. And what I mean by that is what we're doing in females now is we're just giving a super high amount of synthetic estrogen or progesterone if we're using the Mirena IUD, and we're just super saturating our hormones synthetically, and it starts shutting down our FSH and LH. These are our pituitary, our brain hormones. These are the conductors, right? So it shuts those down. Those hormones start to rise a little bit, and the reason why is because we're those hormones would actually start to drop a little bit because our hormones are super, super high. So it just drops down all of our upstream brain hormones because we're super saturating our estrogen and or progesterone, and it's synthetic too.
Definitely, yeah. It's crazy what's going on.
I just want to add one thing there, Barris.
Yeah.
So like the functional medicine philosophy is, hey, we just take the conductor, we pull him off to the side, we say, hey man, see the timing over there with the strings and the flutes, we got to work on this. So we get specific. Instead of just knocking the conductor and taking away his job, we actually get in there and try to fix where the timing's off. And we can do that with blood sugar support. We can do that with diet and lifestyle changes. We can do it with a cyclical augmentation program where we resynchronize progesterone. We can use herbs to help with upstream signaling. We can support the adrenal glands. We can address anemias or nutrient deficiencies. We can also address the infections that are potentially throwing things off. So it's kind of like pulling the conductor off to the side, giving him a pep talk and saying, hey, this is what we got to do, versus just saying, hey, get out of here, go home.
Yeah, exactly. Because guess what? You only have one, right?
Yes.
You can't just replace it.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about the nutrients in the diet. Something that I feel it's weird. We don't really get this tested as much in our normal practitioners. Usually you have to go somewhere else to get a total nutrient deficiency panel.
Yeah.
This seems like something that should be like kind of basic, but I guess why isn't it, and why do we need it?
Well, there's definitely a couple of nutrients that are really important. So I already kind of mentioned the B12. We can infer that by some of the markers I already talked about. Yes. Also, iron's really important. We can look at that via ferritin. On our nutrient, like on a conventional blood test, we can look at alkaline phosphatase. If we see it below 50 or 60, that's typically a sign of zinc deficiency. Also on blood tests, we can look at red blood cell or magnesium red blood cell levels. Not magnesium serum, but magnesium RBC. And we can look
RBC
at
magnesium.
Exactly. We can look at the intercellular amounts of magnesium, which is really, really important. So those are some that we can get on simple blood tests. And then we can also run more specialty ones like a SpectraCell test, which looks at intercellular nutrients of all kinds. And then we can also run an organic acid test, which is another great indirect way of getting our nutrient levels. I like the organic acid testing because it's just easier because you don't have to go to a lab and get a blood draw. But both are really good options.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing, a topic that I know you really like, blood sugar management, getting our fasted glucose and our insulin and our hemoglobin A1C. Like what? Why are these important, and how do we get these tested?
Well, blood sugar is really important because it's one of the biggest hormonal stressors on our body. I just did a video recently about this at youtube.com/justinhealth on blood sugar. But one of the big things is we have more hormones that help bring our blood sugar up than bring it down. So, for instance, we have glucagon, cortisol, we have adrenaline, we have somatostatin, we have IGF-1. We have probably one more hormone I'm missing, but about 5 or 6 hormones that help bring blood sugar up. Now, that's great because evolutionarily speaking, we would have famines and we'd have lots of fasting periods because food wasn't that abundant. So our body adapted to really keep our blood sugar up because typically we were just going without food.
Yeah.
And now that we have this super abundance, well, we're having insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, which is basically caused by blood sugar being too high because our body only has one hormone to bring blood sugar down, which is insulin. And we commonly have insulin resistance now with most of our polycystic ovarian patients, our patients that have PMS, our patients that have adrenal fatigue, our patients that have metabolic syndrome, diabetes, Alzheimer's. They typically have these blood sugar imbalances. And one of the biggest stress on the hormonal system is blood sugar stability. So if we can use markers like fasting glucose can be decent. It's a very late stage marker, so it's not that sensitive. But if you're above 100, that could be a problem. We have hemoglobin A1C. If you're above 5.5, 5.6, that could be a problem. We have fructosamine. That's a great marker. We have, let's see, an oral glucose tolerance test. We can do that at the lab, or we can do a homemade one with a blood sugar meter. We also have fasting insulin. Anything above, 6 or 7 is definitely a sign of moving into insulin resistance. So we have these great markers we can use because we know blood sugar is definitely an issue that really we have not evolved to a place to deal with high blood sugar. Mm-hmm. We've spent way more years with low blood sugar or lower blood sugar because of lack of food abundance, and now we have the exact opposite situation. But it's even worse because we have this overabundance of food, but we have this underabundance of nutrition, meaning we have so many calories available, but so little of these calories contain nutrients because 90% of food that's purchased is processed food, meaning it's packaged, it's not found in Mother Nature.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're coming close to the end of this quick one-on-one, but one more would be, I know we talked about quickly like the total and what you would get in cholesterol panel, but if you did one and you did like a cardiovascular risk, I know some of the things that you might want to look for is some you mentioned before the C-reactive protein, but also maybe the lipid particle size.
Yes.
And the number, and maybe even like homocysteine. What are some markers that you might be looking for?
So if we're looking for cardiovascular risk factors, obviously inflammation is going to be important. C-reactive
Mm-hmm.
protein, erythrocyte, sedimentary rate, fibrinogen. These are all inflammatory markers. Homocysteine as well. And we can also look at particle size. So we can run a VAP test, a vertical auto profile, which looks at HDL, pattern A, pattern B, LDL, pattern A, pattern B. And again, LDL, we want more A. A is good, right? You want an A on your test. And then LDL, B for bad. So we don't want much B. We want more A. These are the large, fluffy, buoyant LDL. That's important. And we can also look at lipoprotein little a. We can also look at genetic tests like apoproteins, like 4,4 apoprotein E is not a good one. Apoprotein B is a little bit different. That's more particle size. Yeah. But we have a genetic apoprotein testing where 4,4 tends to be the worst. That means we really can't be cheating much. We have 3,4. We have 2,2, 2,3. I don't do too much of those testings because, typically it doesn't really tell you much other than the fact if you're a 4,4, you should be really on point. So if you're someone with a 4,4 or a 3,4, it just means you can't get away with that much. So you got to manage your stress. You got to keep the refined sugar to a minimum, keep the healthy fats and healthy proteins and nutrient-dense foods up, and the gluten and all the food allergens down for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, sounds good. We got a lot of great information, and it seems like some of the important things to focus on is like making sure that we test our sex hormones, our thyroid, our excuse me, our nutrient deficiencies, blood sugar, and also any of our cardiovascular risk.
Exactly.
They're pretty good at starting places, and then of course there's so much more. You know
what, Barris? I don't mean to cut you off. I just know if I don't touch upon this, everyone's going to be emailing me afterwards. We didn't talk about thyroid much.
Yeah. So we let's go into it because I know that there's a couple. There's basic. You'll probably go into the thing and just get your TSH, but we know that we need our free T3, our reverse T3, our T4, And there's also some other, like you mentioned, the antibodies. Go over the thyroid stuff.
Sure, and we're going to do a whole podcast on thyroid testing because it's way too nuanced and there's not enough information out there on it. But just a bird's eye view, most people or most conventional doctors and or endocrinologists are just doing TSH testing and maybe T4 testing. This is helpful for people that have elevated TSH or low T4 because you'll get picked up as having a thyroid problem. The assumption is made, though, if your T4 isn't low or if your TSH isn't above 4.5 on the West Coast or 5.5 on the East Coast, then you're fine. The big running joke in functional medicine community, the easiest way to cure someone in California of hypothyroidism is to fly them out to the East Coast because the reference range changes from 4.5 to 5.5. So that's the easiest cure. It's a plane ticket. But outside of that, people really are suffering from thyroid issues, and TSH and T4 aren't enough to figure out if there's a problem. So we have to do deeper testing, and that would include T4. But T4 looks at thyroid hormone in general. It's not looking at the functional aspect, the free portion. And the free portion is only about 2% of the thyroid hormone. All right, so I got this analogy from you one time, Barris. You referred to like the free fractions of thyroid hormone is like driving around a parking spot with 100 spaces, but 98 spaces have cones in them. So that means only 2. So imagine we have 100 cars driving around. So 98 of those cars are our T4 hormone, and maybe the only 2 of the cars are really our T4 free. So only 2 cars out of the 100 get to park in the parking spots. Yeah. And that same analogy then happens with T3. So we imagine having 100 parking spots open for T3. Only 2 are actually able to park in because there are cones in all the other parking spots, right? So we only have 2 hormones or 2% of the hormones that can go in there. And most people don't have the ability to convert T4 to T3. And if we don't have the ability to convert T4 to T3, we may even have higher amounts of reverse T3. Reverse T3 is like putting another cone in the parking spot. So instead of having 2 cones available, now we only have we only have 2 spots available. Now we only have 1 spot available. So it just decreases the ability for our thyroid to even have a metabolic effect. Because for the thyroid to work, in our analogy, the car has to be able to park in the parking spot. The free hormone has to be able to park or go into the receptor site. So again, looking at T4, looking at free in total, and looking at T3 free in total, and then even the antibodies too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we're going to go into an entire podcast on thyroid testing because there's so many different markers that need to be looked at, and so often we're just looking at the TSH, which is not good enough. Definitely not good enough. And we're seeing so many people with thyroid issues and all these different metabolic problems and metabolism that's broken, and a lot of it starts from the thyroid. So making sure that we're actually understanding what's happening in the body and getting the correct measurements are going to help us make those changes. So it definitely sounds awesome.
All right. Great, my man.
So we want to remind you again to make sure that go to beyondwellnessradio.com/newsletter. Make sure that you hop on the list. You'll be the first one to be able to access all these podcasts. Also, you'll be first whenever we have anything ready, set to go, any freebies, any kind of launches. You'll be the first one to know. And then also to get further understandings, make sure that you go to justinhealth.com. And he also has all of these labs and the comprehensive lab that we talked about today available that you can just purchase straight from there and to get these labs looked at. And again, please give us a review on iTunes. It helps us so much to spread this message and to help anybody. If you know anybody that needs help with lab testing or have any questions, make sure you send this to them. Send it to an email or tweet it. It really helps get this message sent out. So thank you guys again for listening. Thank you, Dr. Dustin, for your time.
Excellent talk, Barris. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.